Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chakey, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right. Thanks, guys.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. Anthony Chakey is an American medical doctor specializing in neurosurgery, who over the span of 20 years has researched the optimal nutrition habits for athletic performance and health. It is his assertion that most so-called chronic diseases are actually caused by the food we eat or don't eat, and in many cases can be reversed easily with dietary changes. He is an All-American rugby player and a former professional athlete in England and America. Dr. Chakey has dedicated many years and a large part of his professional practice to the study and education of diet and nutrition, and personally practices a fully carnivorous diet to this day with amazing results. He began his university education studying molecular and cellular biology with a minor in chemistry at the University of Washington in Seattle at the age of 15. Wow. Which culminated in attaining his MD from the Royal College of Surgeons. He currently resides in Perth, Australia, where he specializes in neurosurgery and does private consultations and clinics in functional medicine and nutrition. Dr. Anthony Chakey, what an honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
I was trying to think back on some of the things that I was doing when I was 15 years old. I'm not proud of most of the things I did when I was 15, but I certainly wasn't studying neurosurgery. That's pretty amazing. How did you get into college so early?
Well, I mean, I was definitely doing a lot of stupid things as a 15-year-old as well. I think I slept drunk at my first bus stop when I was 14. So, I started off early on a lot of things. But when I was going into eighth grade, I was 13 years old. A buddy of mine, John Laney, who's a corporate attorney in Seattle now. He just came up to me, and he and I were always did really well in school, and sort of we would always just sort of challenge each other, and we were sort of the only two people that could sort of keep up with each other in school. And so he came up to me and just said, "Hey, there's this program at the University of Washington in Seattle that if you take the SATs, at any time, whether or not you graduate high school, you can start taking classes as a matriculated student." And he said, "You want to do it?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay, why not?" And I was like, "When is it?" And he said, "Oh, it's next week." I'm like, "Next week?" I'm like, "How the hell? I can't do it next week. Like, I don't have a book. I haven't studied. I don't even have any resources." And he said, "Dude, we're 13. Like, it doesn't matter. Just do it and see what happens." Like, that's a very good point. And so we took it, and we both did really well. And so we didn't do it in order to start going to college. We did it just to do it, and maybe not have to do it again in high school. But we were always sort of skipping classes or skipping ahead in classes. And, I was taking, I would always be taking like 2 math classes per term. So I was taking, algebra and geometry, and then I do pre-calculus and then go straight to calculus. So I was doubling up on all my math and science classes anyway. And so when I was in junior high, I was going to the high school to take all my math and science classes because I'd run out in the junior high. And by the time I was going into high school, it's a 3-year high school where I'm from, I'd already taken all the math and science classes, really. And those were all my favorite classes. And so I just sort of looked at it and I was like, well, I can just sit here for 3 years and just dumb myself down and just take all of, the stupid classes that I really am not interested in, and then forget everything that I've done, and then actually be at a disadvantage when I go to college. Or I can just go to university now. And so I just did that because, it didn't make any sense to go at an accelerated rate and then be hindered by it because I would have just gone really fast and accelerated really fast, and then hit a dead point, not been able to take any more classes. And then I would have forgotten everything. And then I would have to sort of retake classes to catch back up. So like that didn't make any sense. And so, so I just went to college early.
It's amazing. Wow. Very proactive of you. I love that.
Yeah.
I think when I was 15, after 2 years of taking French, I could say I'm a pineapple, and that's about all I could do. So way to take advantage of all those advanced classes and use that momentum to get yourself into college. It's amazing. Yeah. Really excited to chat with you today. We've talked to a lot of carnivores. We're definitely big proponents of the carnivore diet around here. We talked to a lot of people about the advantages of eating lots of meat. We've even talked to people like Sally Norton, who talks about the harms of oxalates, and that can be found in a lot of plant foods. But I'm really excited to chat with you as the plant-free MD to talk really truly about the harms of eating plants and have like a really comprehensive, kind of a guide as to why plants, are so prevalent in our diets and why maybe they should or shouldn't be. But I would just like to talk about your story and how you first came across this. You came across this quite a while ago, and understanding that the plants really are not that great for us. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So, and that's my approach to this as well. And that's why, I call my podcast the Plant-Free MD, because it's not just about eating meat. That's obviously a big part of it. But the main thing is not eating all these other things that actually cause harm. So, when I was first talking to people about this, they would say, oh yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. That makes sense. But, I don't mind eating salad. So, I'll just keep eating salad. And the point is, it's not that you don't have to eat salads. You don't have to eat vegetables to get all your nutrition from, because you can get all your nutrition from meat, which is true. But in fact, you don't want to eat the salad. The salad is actually bad for you. So it's not just like, oh, hey, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. It's like you shouldn't do it. The reason being, yeah, exactly. The reason being is that, plants are living organisms, and they want to stay living organisms. All living things have a defense down to single-celled organisms. And while animals can run away or fight back, plants can't. And so they have to use different means to defend themselves against predation. They have all sorts of different ways of doing that, which are very, very interesting. But one of the main ones is that they just use poisons. They are just toxic to animals and insects. Caffeine was developed as an insecticide, and it's actually, a neurotoxin. It can cause seizures in people that are prone to epilepsy. So, these things actually do cause harm to us, and they're supposed to. Plants don't want to be eaten by and large. Obviously, there are exceptions in symbiotic relationships with certain animal species, but that's how these things have developed. And so some people say, well, like, oh, this plant doesn't want to be eaten, so it uses poison. It's like, oh, but that cow doesn't want to be eaten either. Oh, shush, that doesn't meet with the narrative. I saw some guy say that specifically. Well, the point is that the cow can defend itself as well. It just has different defenses because it's mobile, because it can use kinetic defenses. It doesn't need to be poisonous. Its flesh doesn't have to be poisonous to the lion that eats it, where a eucalyptus leaf does. So I learned in seventh or eighth grade biology that plants and animals are in an evolutionary arms race. Plants becoming more and more poisonous, so less and less animals can eat them, so that they can survive and thrive, or else they go extinct, which most species of life have gone extinct at this point. So everything that's come through the gauntlet of evolution is battle hardened, including the plants. And then animals, also evolving to and adapting to being able to break down specific poisons safely so that they can eat a specific plant. And then other things can't eat that. So that's their conserved resource. They don't have to compete for resources as much, like, pandas, koalas, giraffes and everything else. These things eat plants, but they eat very specific plants because they can eat that plant. It's safe to eat that plant. They eat other plants, they'll die. People know this. This is common knowledge. Almost every plant on earth is, quote unquote, inedible, meaning that it will kill you if you eat a small amount of it. Well, then we have edible plants. The only distinction there is that they don't kill you very quickly, but that doesn't mean that they don't use poisons. That doesn't mean that they don't use toxins. They do. It's just that we have some inbuilt defenses to these things, but we don't have immunities. It's not like cows and grass, where a cow can eat, and there's different kinds of grasses, and some cows can't, and cows can't eat certain kinds of grasses. So when you're eating your evolved plant, then you can do that. But if your species hasn't evolved to eat a specific plant, that plant is bad for you. So, we learn this, we actually teach this to kids, and people say, oh, why don't we know this? Or maybe they call bullshit on it. You ask anybody who studied botany, even taken one class on it, they'll be like, oh yeah, actually that's true. Study horticulture, one class on horticulture. Oh yeah, no, that's actually true. All plants, use some form of toxin. That is a rule across the plant and fungus kingdoms. Just period. That is hard fact. That is hard science. Like that's really not up for debate. That is a thing that exists in nature. And just because someone doesn't know that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means they need to read more. And I encourage everyone to do that. Just go to an introductory botany book. It is there. Okay. Study, take a book on horticulture. It's there. So when I was in college at the University of Washington, I was taking cancer biology. I always knew I wanted to be a doctor, and I was always interested in those sorts of classes. So I was taking cancer biology, and we were sort of going back over this, the fact that plants use poisons, to stop predation, to deter predation. And this is a cancer biology class. So we were looking at it from a cancer perspective. And so we were looking at the different amount of carcinogens that were in, plants that we would eat on a regular basis. And we learned that, like Brussels sprouts, like the most reviled vegetable of all from all kids, there's a good reason for that. They had, at the time, we had already discovered 136 separate human carcinogens just in Brussels sprouts. And mushrooms had over 100. Spinach, kale, lettuce, celery, cabbage, cucumber, broccoli, you name it, everything we were given lists, literally page after page of all the different plants that you've ever eaten. And every single one, there wasn't a single one that had less than 60 carcinogens in it. And so this is where that bitter taste comes from. This is why kids hate the taste of vegetables, when they're first eating solids, because they're much more closely attuned to their genetics. And so that bad taste, that's a very good indication that there's something bad there for you. A bitter taste, a bad taste, that is your brain and tongue are sophisticated machines. And that is their way of telling you there is something bad in there for you, bad in there. So if something is bitter, it is bad for you, right? This is why medicine's bitter. Well, what is medicine? Medicine is a poison that just causes more benefit than harm in certain circumstances. But just like you're not going to take antibiotics every single day, you shouldn't eat, broccoli or celery or whatever every single day. Maybe there's some medicinal purposes for that, but maybe not. But whether or not they do, those medicinal purposes are only of a net benefit when you're sick and when you're unwell, and that's treating you for something. So we were quite blown away by this. Obviously, as I think everyone I tell that to is just like, that can't be real. I thought the same thing. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? I thought it must be joking. He must just be screwing with us. Everyone was literally looking around wildly, like, what's going on? Like, who's in on the joke? I was looking for like a TA somewhere in the back of the class that's just sitting there like smirking, like, he does this all the time. There was no one. And it slowly sort of dawned on us that, like, Jesus, this guy's serious. And, and I remember like just thinking in my head, I was like, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? And he just looked at us and he's just like, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. So I was like, right, screw plants. And I just stopped eating them right away. And I went to the store. Everything was a plant. Everything had plant product. Everything had some sort of product in it that came from plants, be it, grains or seeds or vegetables or fruit, sugar, obviously. Everything came from a plant. And so I just ended up just getting eggs, meat, and milk, because those were the only things I could find that didn't have plants. And so I ended up inadvertently becoming a carnivore for several years, at least 5. And I was playing, professional rugby at the time. I was traveling all over the US and Canada and then internationally. And I was just, most of that time I was a pure carnivore, and I just never felt better. And I've never performed better, and I've never played better. And I've never had such, exercise tolerance. And I've never been able to push myself so hard. I've never recovered so fast, except until now when I'm doing it again, and my body does the same thing. I'm 20 years older and I feel just as good, and, I don't have the time anymore to dedicate like I did before. I was training, sometimes anywhere from 6 to even 10 hours a day, every day. And so I was getting in absolutely insane shape. I don't have the time for that anymore. But when I do, I can push myself much further than I could before, and I recover nearly instantly, and I get much more benefit out of that. So that was my introduction to it. And then when I was in England playing, I just didn't have the same access to food. I don't know why, but the steaks, I couldn't get them to brown in England. I just couldn't do it. I don't know if they had a higher water content or something, but like they only went gray on the outside. And then I just kept cooking them until they browned, but they never browned. And so I ended up cooking these things well done. And I just, wasn't having fun with it. And then so I just couldn't figure out how the hell to cook a damn steak there. I don't, I'm sure it was me, but like there was something going wrong. And so I ended up getting meat that was already cooked. And that seemed to be easier just because I was playing all the time and training all the time. I just didn't have time to mess around. And some of the times that meat would be breaded, like breaded chicken drumsticks. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, it's a plant, but is it that much? Does it make that much of a difference? I'm like, well, let's just see. It did. It made a big difference. I remember a couple of months into it, I was getting aches and pains and little, niggling sores and just little weird injuries. And I was like, oh, I don't, what the hell's going on? And I just I didn't have the same energy that I had. I didn't have that same just like gusto for, exercise that I had before. And I remember thinking, I was like, what's the difference? Like, what's going on? Am I just not pushing myself? Am I not training as hard? Like, what am I doing? Or I was 25 at the time. So I was like, is that it? Is just 25? That's the crest. And then you're just going downhill after that, which is certainly what I thought when I was 21, 22. My friends would be like, oh yeah, I'm 25. So I'm still young. Still doing this. I'm like, dude, you're dying. Like, what are you talking about? And then, so I'm 25. I'm like, shit, am I dying? It's like, is that it? But, looking back, that was when I unknowingly switched off of a carnivore diet and started eating these plants again. Several years ago, I came across, more solid information that humans actually are carnivores. That's the kind of animal that we are. And we're taught this. We're taught that we're apex predators, top of the food chain. What animal do you know of at the top of the food chain that eats anything except animals below it on the food chain? Can't think of a single thing. Sharks and dolphins don't eat kelp, for roughage. Lions don't, enjoy a fresh garden salad every now and then. They just don't. And so, we're the same. And so when we step off of that, when we stop eating our naturally evolved, biologically appropriate species specific diet, which is meat, that's when we run into troubles. And so all of a sudden, everything just I had this epiphany. All of a sudden I started looking at medicine from that perspective, that humans are animals, and the kind of animal that we are a carnivore. And we're a carnivore that are not eating and living as carnivores. And this is where you start seeing this breakdown in health. And it's a sort of a poison exposure relationship. When we get exposed to these poisons in these plants, especially in abundance, we end up developing different diseases like heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune disorders, and even Alzheimer's and autoimmune, like autism, like neurodevelopmental delays as well. And these have all been linked to diet, and some have causative links as well, such as autism. So, this is a very, very important part of medicine. I think it's really the most important part, because it's something so easy that you can just eliminate this huge swaths of so-called disease, because they're not diseases, they're poisonings. We're being poisoned, and we're not getting enough of our appropriate nutrition. And that's sort of my approach to all this, is getting people the right species specific food, which is fatty meat. And the fat is very important. That's one of the most important parts that people are still afraid of, though they shouldn't be. It does not cause heart disease. It does not cause diabetes. It does not cause obesity. It just doesn't. And so getting people back on that, and then specifically eliminating the different things that are harmful to them.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I really appreciate that explanation. I've kind of oscillated over the years that I've been carnivore, between being very strict and also being a little bit more lenient. Like for somebody that's, been on a strict carnivore diet, they've resolved a lot of issues. They're feeling great. Over time, they can kind of add things back in and not notice so much of a negative effect. But I wonder, especially after listening to so much of your content, how much of that is actually true? And I wonder if we're giving up some of our most optimal, feeling and living, because we're starting to introduce some of those things. And you gave a great example in your podcast recently about, early on, you were a very strict carnivore, and then you ate some meat that had spices on it. And I'm really curious if you could tell the listener, like, what happened when you included some of those spices. You didn't want to be rude. I believe you were with your family, something we run into all the time. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened as you kind of were more strict, and then you make a little bit of allowance for some of these plants to creep back in? What actually happens?
Yeah. So, you can actually see, the contrast pretty easily. When you feel, I don't feel a little better. I don't feel a lot better. I feel 1,000 times better than I've ever felt in my entire life, including when I was a professional athlete, not on this diet. So as compared to myself. So when you feel amazing like that and you get something that slips back in and it has like little spices or whatever, like you can actually feel that actually affects you. And so this is something that, I encourage people to do. Go pure, get rid of everything and just go meat and water for a month. And then you don't think that, black pepper is that big of a deal. You don't think that coffee is that big of a deal. Okay. Be off it for a month, try back in, like you'll see a difference. And if that difference is fine for you and you don't mind that, fine. It's, it's your life. For me, it's way too much. I drink 1 cup of black coffee and I'm sore for 2 days. That's not worth it, and, I get a little bit of beans or rice mixed in with my food. I'm trying to scrape it off, but, a little bit stays on. And my back feels like it's in stabbing pain for 4 full days afterwards. That's not worth it. Nothing tastes better than being healthy feels. And I believe you're sort of talking about when my parents were going carnivore, my mom started to do this. And so she was just making a big roast, like a lamb roast. And she put every single herb and seasoning she could find on this thing. It was like literally like crusted green. And I was like, oh, Mom, that's supposed to use plants. Like that's literally the whole point of this. She's like, no, we're not having any plants. We're not doing a salad. We're not doing anything. This is just the meat. This is just for the meat. I'm like, no, those are plants. And that's, you're putting it doesn't just go away because you put it on meat. You like tip, a baggie of cocaine into your coffee and it dissolves. It doesn't just go away. It's like, oh, no, it's just coffee. I'm just having coffee. Like, okay, there's other things going on there though. And so I didn't want to be rude. I was at my mom's house and I was sort of looking at it. I'm like, really don't want to eat that. I kind of want to just scrape it off. But, I didn't want to I didn't want to be weird and scrape it off or be rude or seem rude. And so I was also curious because I was like, well, let's see what this does. Let's see how this affects me. And I'm always interested in experiment. And so I had about 1.5 pieces of lamb and I was clinically depressed for the rest of the night. I was so upset. I mean, I was beside myself. And, I get bouts of low mood and I've had, depression in the past, not to, such an extent as many people have, but it's something that I've had to deal with. And all of a sudden this came, bam, hit me just straight in the face. And I was so upset. And I remember at the time that night, I was extremely upset. And I literally contemplated suicide, not just like, oh, that'd be nuts. I actually thought up a plan. I was like, this is how I'm going to do it. And I remember thinking to myself, all of a sudden, like, thankfully I had some sort of, part in me that was able to sort of look from the outside and say, that's not normal. I shouldn't be feeling like this. There wasn't anything that happened tonight that should make me feel this upset and this sad and this low, but I do feel this bad. So this is pathological. This is something wrong with my brain chemistry. This isn't actual grief. This isn't actual sadness. This is something wrong. And so I said, okay, if this is pathological, obviously shouldn't do anything. And so I'm just going to go to sleep and I'll try and sleep this off. I'll see how I feel in the morning. If I still feel like I want to do this in the morning, I'll do it in the morning. I made a deal with myself that that's what I would do. I woke up in the morning and, needless to say, I didn't feel like that anymore. I just felt more emotionally numb. And I remember thinking to myself, what the hell was that about? And I was thinking back on everything that was said, everything, the conversation at the table, everything that happened. And I remember thinking, I was like, there's nothing there that should have upset me like that. Was I just completely overreacting to something, or was this the plants? And I was like, well, there's only one way to find out. And so, ate more of the stupid lamb with the plants on it. And I was clinically depressed the rest of the damn day, but at least now I knew why. And so I didn't even think about suicide, because I was just like, now I just was able to focus that upset feelings towards the plants. I'm like, damn these plants. I knew plants were trying to kill me. I hate these things. Keep these things the hell away from me. And so now, and so, I have this very strong aversion to these things, because I know what they do to me. They make me feel like garbage, and I don't want anything to do with that. And you're right. We can sort of convince ourselves that, well, maybe I can have this back in, or maybe someone who has an issue derived from like leaky gut and autoimmune disorders. After a while, your leaky gut will heal. Your autoimmune issues will take care and sort of slowly heal. And maybe you sort of introduce something back on, and maybe early on, because you had leaky gut, because you had your body was more sensitive to this, you would have a bigger flare up. Well, maybe now you don't have that much of a response, so you fool yourself into thinking, oh, it's safe now. It's still poison, and it's going to build up in your body, and it's going to break down your body's ability to take care of it and detoxify, because we have a very limited ability to do that. Now, our livers are awesome. They can do quite a lot of detoxing, but there's going to be some damage done, and eventually you will overwhelm your system and cause even more damage. And then you can if you just slowly eke into it, then people will can fall off easier. Some people say that what I'm doing is too strict, and that's going to put people off, and they're going to slip off. I've noticed the exact opposite with my patients and with myself. When you have a lot of gray area, and you can, oh yeah, you can kind of do this, you can kind of do that, and then things are fungible, and there aren't just clear lines. I can do this, I can't do that. Where if you just do a pure carnivore diet, it's the easiest prescription to follow in the world. You know exactly what you can eat. You know exactly what you can't eat. My hard rule: no plants or fungi, no sugar, nothing artificial. That goes for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. So, seasonings, pepper, that's a plant. Honey, that's a sugar. Artificial sweeteners, they're artificial. Stevia, it's a plant. So, you know exactly what you can and can't eat. You just eat meat and you feel great. You can eat at any time of the day or night. It doesn't matter. If you're not eating carbohydrates, it doesn't matter what time you eat. And you eat as much as you care to, because your taste will tell you. If it tastes good, that means your body wants those nutrients. And so you just keep eating until it stops tasting good. It will. Eventually, a steak will stop tasting good. And you'll just go, ugh, I don't really want to keep eating that. You stop. That's your body's way of naturally, of natural portion control. And so it's very, very easy. And I think that when people blur those lines, maybe it's helpful to get them onto it in the first place. That could be helpful for some people. But I think eventually it's a much stronger position to be in if you're only eating meat and water. A lot of people, if they sort of are eating other things and dabbling, they're mostly eating meat. I find that they're the ones who never really go full, and they're the ones who slip up a lot more, because it's not as big of a deal to them. They're not thinking like, oh, I don't want that anywhere near me. And also they don't necessarily feel as good. They feel a lot better than they did. But getting rid of that last little bit of carbs and animal and plant toxins actually make a huge difference, because it's that first initial introduction that actually has a big weight of effect on our system, and they sort of derail our hormonal system and our metabolic system, all day potentially. And so you can add on to that and make it worse, but you've already done a significant amount of a disproportional amount of damage as well. So that's why I do just pure meat and water myself.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you kind of went into detail about that. As far as like the restriction, because a lot of people would listen to this and say, well, why can't you live a little? Like you're only eating meat. That's so restrictive. Like, but they don't understand what you mentioned. Like you don't know what you don't know, or how you could possibly feel. For me, it was sugar. Like I always thought I could moderate it. Like if I had it every now and again, it would be fine. And last summer when I started eating a pie, I couldn't stop eating the pie, even though I didn't want any more pie. And I stayed up all night. I was sweating my brains out. My anxiety was through the roof. And I decided that day, like, this is not worth it. This taste is maybe fine for 30 seconds, but it's not worth it. And so I don't consider it restrictive to never have sugar. You're right. It is so much more simple to walk through a grocery store, go to a restaurant and just say like, oh, great. See all those aisles? I don't go there. There's no reason for me to be in those aisles. I where my food is, I can go to those sections in the store, be out of there in 3 minutes, and know exactly what my diet's going to be, and it's really enriching and filling, and I don't get anxiety. It's not restrictive at all.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And it does make shopping so much easier. Like, I mean, the entire store is something that I just don't care about, and so I'm not looking around, oh gosh, what do I need? I was just like, hey, you go to the meat, pick up some steaks, done. And, I sort of like, I have fun shopping and say, well, what meat looks good today? And then I don't waste my time on anything else. You're exactly right. I don't think it's restrictive at all. It's a very good point. What I think is restrictive is diabetes. Diabetes is really restrictive. Being 200 pounds overweight and having your back and knees hurt constantly, I think that's restrictive. I think, having autoimmune disorders and Alzheimer's, I think that's really restrictive. I think your children not growing up to their genetic potential and maybe even having, extremely bad developmental delays such as autism, I think that's very restrictive. I think that restricts someone's entire humanity. And it's something that's completely preventable. It's something that doesn't need to happen. So I think that it's very freeing. I think that, I'm free from buying all the processed garbage at the store. I don't have to get bought into all the different, ad campaigns and marketing propaganda for the new superfood and the new this and the new that. I know what the superfood is. I know exactly what my body needs. I just get that. And my brain works and my body works to its genetic potential. That's very freeing. I give my body the fuel that it needs so that I can live my life. It's sort of strange now. I look at, the world, and now that I'm on the outside of this looking in, it's very funny because, I'm not beholden to restaurants and bars and coffee shops for my entertainment and social exposure. Most people are. And we surround ourselves by food and drink, and that's the entire makeup of our social interaction. Like people can't just hang out anymore. They can't like go and do things. Like everyone's just, oh, let's meet for coffee, let's meet for drinks, let's meet for lunch, let's meet for brunch, let's meet for dinner. Like, can you actually hold a conversation with people if you're not eating? Like I can. I think it's quite it's quite engaging when you're actually able to talk to somebody and actually do things. So I think that's restrictive. I think having to eat 5 times a day, and the only time, and because you have to eat so often, that's where you have to surround your social experience with eating. I still go out to eat with people. I still go to coffee. I just drink water and I eat meat. There's always meat on the meal unless you go to a vegan restaurant, which I've done with my friends, and just drank water. It's not that hard. I don't care. And, to like what you were saying with the sugar, that is, fructose is a drug. It's an actual drug. It actually gives a dopamine response to the addiction centers of your brain, just like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamines. And there are MRI studies actually showing that the same areas of your brain that die off from using methamphetamines and cocaine and heroin through this dopamine response, because dopamine actually turns your cells, they're excitatory, so your neurons are firing. If your neurons are firing for too long, they die. They have to turn off and rest, or they die. And so you keep pushing this and stimulating it and stimulating and stimulating, all of a sudden these things die off. Sugar does the same thing. And so sugar, this is what we've been calling this a sugar high for decades, since I was a kid. Anyway, I'm sure before that as well, give these things in, they're bouncing all over the wall, and then they're coming down, they're getting, give me more. And they're just freaking out. You imagine a 27-year-old coming off of heroin doing that, and it's sort of the same thing, except they haven't been, socialized. The child has, but it's the same reaction. They're just freaking out and they want their drug. So this is addictive as a drug, because it is a drug. And so you do find yourselves getting trapped in eating it, which is why, when people say like, oh, you can have a bit of fruit and honey, I think that's all well and good. Maybe they're the people that promote that, like Dr. Saladino and Carnivore Aurelius, you read their stuff, they're very well meaning. They say like, look, this can cause organ dysfunction, if you don't get carbohydrates and fructose. You don't, though. You really don't. Your body makes blood sugar and glycogen, and it even actually makes fructose in certain isolated areas. But the National Institute of Science and National Academy of Science and the Institute of Medicine both said that the requirement, the daily requirement for carbohydrates, or even the lifetime requirement for carbohydrates, is 0 grams. 0. You do not need these things to survive or to thrive, or else the Inuits wouldn't be here, because there are no carbohydrates or sugar or honey or fruit at the North Pole. And our ancestors came through 30,000 years of ice ages at a time. And there were like, several of these. And so, if we weren't able to survive exclusively on meat, we wouldn't be here. No one would be here. And there's tons of indigenous tribes that don't eat any fruit or honey and exclusively eat meat their whole lives. And, maybe every now and then they have some if they have access to it, but quite often people don't. And so, you can't live generationally only eating meat unless meat has absolutely everything it needs for you in the proportion you need it. And that's what we find, And so I think that it's probably a bad idea for people to reintroduce honey and fructose containing foods such as fruit, simply because it's a drug and it's bad for you. It's broken down to the same byproducts as alcohol in our body. The UC San Francisco biochemistry department showed that conclusively in 2009. That's what it does. And so you get the same diseases from those breakdown products from fructose as you do from alcohol. So you get fatty liver disease, cirrhosis, diabetes, heart disease. Now it's being shown to be implicated in cancers and Alzheimer's. That's not something that you want. It's certainly not something you want to give your kids and screw with their body. This is being implicated in Alzheimer's, which is a very serious, fatal neurodegenerative process. What's that doing to a developing brain? What's that doing to a fetus? It's not going to be good. I can tell you that. And so I think that I think that it has to do with other neurodevelopmental delays, such as autism. There are multiple different kinds of autism. Autism spectrum disorder. There's a spectrum of symptoms and kinds of autism. Well, to me, that means there's a spectrum of causes as well. And I think one of those causes is exposure to sugar and carbohydrates in the genetically susceptible. And so, obviously, you need a genetic predisposition and an environmental trigger to get most of these things. Some things are just, you get poison, you eat poison, you get poison. But some of these things, you need to be susceptible to it. And you'll have other problems if you're not susceptible to it. But, I remember when I was a kid as well, we moved up to Kirkham, Washington, is when we first came across Costco. And, we went there, and it was like summer break when I was a kid. And they had this 10-pound pack of gummy bears, and gummy bears were hands down my favorite candy. Like, love these things. And I was like, oh my God, can we please get these? I don't know how I convinced my mom to do it. We almost never had sugar in the house, which was a blessing. But she ended up getting this for me. And I remember gorging myself on just handfuls of gummy bears all day. I was just playing video games and eating gummy bears all day, every day. And I remember getting through several handfuls and really enjoying it. Wow, this is great. This is great. Got to the point where it started to taste gross, and I really didn't like it, but I could not stop eating this stuff. I just kept doing it. My mouth felt all like grimy and coarse. And I was just like, my tongue was all raw. And it was horrible. And I did not enjoy any single one of these things. And I kept thinking that, I'm like, I just really don't enjoy this. This is gross. I just couldn't stop eating. I'm like, why am I still doing this? Why am I doing this? And I kept thinking, like, maybe this will be good this time. No, it's really not. Okay. Maybe this time. No, it's really not. And, the next day I remember waking up and like, I still have gummy bears. I can do that. I'm like, well, why am I doing this to myself again? I'm like, all right, well, let's see what they taste like today. They tasted good again at first. Within a couple of handfuls, it was gross again. I just kept eating the damn things. And then after that point, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to work my way through this and just power through and just finish these damn things off so I can stop eating them. It was, that's not good. Like you shouldn't be doing that with anything. And so, that was my sort of experience with that. And, so that's that compulsive eating, and it makes you think you're starving when you're not. Carbohydrates in general do this. They raise your insulin, which blocks leptin, which comes from your fat cells to tell your brain how much energy you have in storage. And so it's like a running gas cage. And, when you block that, it's like breaking your gas tank. So it just looks like you're running on empty the whole time. And so you were going like, oh, I got to get gas. I got to get gas. I got to get gas. So you're just constantly, filling up, and you're spilling gas all over the place, but you don't realize it because you're like, oh, I'm on empty. I'm on empty. So your brain is telling you you're starving to death. You need to eat. You need to eat, because your blood sugar is dropping too. Because when insulin's up, it forces energy into cells. It doesn't allow it to come out of cells. And so now you can't make blood sugar. You can't make glycogen. You're not making ketones. And so the only energy you have are these exogenous carbohydrates that you've eaten and the glycogen that you've now stored because of them. And then when you start running out of that, your blood sugar starts dropping off, and you start getting all upset and tired, and think, oh gosh, I really need to eat something. So we do this 3-4 times a day. Why is that? You're eating thousands of calories. You're eating way too much. You're eating way more than you actually need. And yet you're still hungry and you still feel awful. And so, that means that something's broken. Your senses, that are ingrained and finely tuned over millions and millions of years of evolution, they don't just break like that. And why do things taste bad if they're good for us? That doesn't make sense either. Things can taste good, maybe sugar, that's an outlier, but we recognize that's something safe that we can eat short term so that we can get what we want, but it's going to damage us long term. But if something tastes bad, it is bad. That's just a rule. And so, why can we not trust our taste? Why can we not trust our hunger and satiety signals? That doesn't make sense. But when you're eating naturally, you can listen to all these things. And so that's when you're more on the right track. So, it's a very harmful substance, sugar and carbohydrates in general. And, they make you hungry. They make you overeat. They're addictive. And so people start off adding in a little bit of honey, like, oh, I was told I could eat this. Great. And they have some honey, they have some sugar, and it tastes good, and they like it. It makes them feel good. Of course it does. It's a drug. People like drugs. That's why they do drugs. But they're drugs. And so it's going to catch up with you eventually. And so, the people say like, oh, a little bit of honey and fruit. Okay. But it starts off as little, but this is a drug. I'm sure your cocaine habit started off as a little bit of cocaine every now and then as well. The problem is that a little bit can turn into a lot very easily with addictive substances. And I've worked with many patients who've listened to that advice and basically found it as an excuse to refeed their sugar addiction. And so they started eating carbohydrates again. They started eating fruit again. They started eating honey again. And it started off as a little, and a little more, and a little more, and a little more. And they're like, oh, this is good for me. I can do this. And then within, 5-6 months, they're back eating, pizza and donuts and all sorts of garbage. And they've put on all this weight and they're sick again. And then, some of them have seen, me talk about this, and they've approached me and just said, wow, this was the exact cycle that I took. And now, having a look at this, I'm like, yeah, I've just got to get rid of everything. I've got to get rid of the sugar as well. And so I think that it's important to realize that. And I think it's important to understand that you really don't need carbohydrates. You flat out don't. You certainly don't need fructose. There are no biochemical processes in the body that require exogenous fructose and can't be accomplished by something else. None. So you don't need this stuff. You certainly don't need it. And I would argue that you really don't want it either.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. That was something specifically I was going to ask you about. There are popular carnivores like the ones that you mentioned, Dr. Saladino, Carnivore Aurelius. They were pushing a lot of organ supplements for a long time. And I don't know if they still are. They're not people that I follow anymore. I do have a high respect for them. And they were, definitely people that helped me with my understanding of the carnivore diet for a while. They were pushing a lot of organ supplements. And we had a listener question that was related to this. I've never made this connection, but eating too many organs, and then because you're eating too many organs, needing supplement or carbohydrates to supplement your diet. And now we see these people eating honey, eating fruit, eating fructose, like you said, eating juice, which I get a lot of questions about this, and people get really confused about it. And so how would you address that? I know it's something you just kind of answer, but this is like really specifically something that's on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is true with juice. I mean, where was that in our evolutionary past? If you're going to go by, where we came from and how we evolved, we certainly didn't evolve with juice. I can tell you that. And was
there a juicer on the walls in France where they
Yeah,
did
exactly.
first
Yeah,
paintings, like a little juicing machine.
Just there with a stick blender,
Exactly.
and a pineapple. No, and the fruits that we have now for juicing, these things are man-made. The original mango is a very tough, fibrous, not very sweet plant with a massive seed and barely any fruit. It's not the same thing. We've been, selectively breeding these things in a concentrated manner in order to make them as sweet as possible. That's not what we found in nature. So it's very, very different. Drinking juice certainly didn't happen. It just didn't. But that's something that I was very surprised by with Carnivore Realist, because they started saying, "Oh, no, actually, I was wrong. You actually need fructose. You actually need sugar, or else you'll get thyroid dysfunction," was what he was talking about at the time. And I've read one of his posts on it, and he cites different studies, but the problem is that you can get a study that says anything that you want. You need to be able to analyze these things and look at it as like, wait, this is talking about some very small mechanistic process. What does that translate to on the bigger picture? The bigger picture is we actually are carnivores. That's actually the kind of animal we are, and we actually existed exclusively on meat for millions of years. Okay, so if we needed fruit in order to survive and thrive, we would not be here, because we wouldn't have made it through the ice ages. The Eskimos right now would all be dying. They'd be dead. You can't go very long with extreme hypothyroidism. You don't make it. And let's say that it's sort of borderline and low level hypothyroidism, just to make you miserable, but it doesn't kill you, which it can kill you. Your kids are going to be screwed, because hypothyroidism in a woman when she's pregnant will make that fetus develop completely abnormally. There's actually a condition called cretinism. That's all the best insults used to be medical terminology. So call someone a cretin. That's a real thing. It's congenital hypothyroidism, and they get very specific facial deformities. They're short stature, so they're very small, and they're very severely intellectually delayed and impaired. And so this is a very serious issue. This is not a joke. And so if you had an entire race of people, an entire civilization that was exclusively eating meat and all getting hypothyroidism, all their kids would be getting cretinism. That lasts exactly one generation and you're dead. That's not going to work, So that doesn't even pass the smell test, and certainly juice doesn't. But I like Carnivore Realist and I like Saladino. I would point my patients to their resources regularly before I had my own things to show them. I still think they have great resources. I mean, I disagree with them on this one, but that's one of the few things I disagree with them on. So I still think they're great resources. I just think this one is I certainly differ with. You brought up the organs, and that's something that I've conjectured, and I'm not their doctor. I don't know their medical history or anything like that, but it's just something that I've thought about from a first principle sort of basis. When you're eating organs, they're saying you should eat, and they do have supplement lines, and I think Carnivore Realist has like a dried liver snacks or something like that, and they really say like liver is really important, organs are really important, and I agree, they're very nutrient dense. Well, what was that word? It's dense. They're nutrient dense. They have a lot packed in a little. Do you need that much? That's the question. If you eat a bite of a polar bear liver, you will die from vitamin A poisoning. That's a well-known fact. Okay. Well, liver has a lot of vitamin A. This is a fat-soluble vitamin, and so it stores in your body. You don't just pee out the excess like you do vitamin C or vitamin B. So this will build up and it'll store up, and you can start having problems, and you can have problems that go on for years. Because this is fat soluble, it doesn't really go away that easily. It's actually kind of hard to clear. And so vitamin A can build up if you're eating things out of proportion. Now, if you look, even Dr. Saladino, he shows that all the, these different tribes like the Hadza, they'll make a kill and they'll get this liver, and it's like they're like treating it reverently, and they pass it around. Everyone takes a small bite. But what are they doing? They're taking a small bite, And how often are they hunting? They hunt an animal, they take that down, depending on the size of the animal, depending on the size of the tribe. Maybe they're eating one animal for every few days for everyone, and they're getting one liver. And so they're getting like a bite every few days, maybe even every one day. It's one bite. The rest of their meals are largely skeletal muscle meat. You have to think to yourself, how many hundreds of pounds of skeletal muscle meat and fat are there in a cow compared to every 1 pound of liver? It's literally hundreds to one. Okay. So, if you're nutrient deprived and you're on a standard American diet and you're not really getting very good nutrient supply, liver's your best friend, but if you're on a carnivore diet, skeletal muscle meat and fat have everything that you need in the proportion that you need it by definition, because that's what we evolved on. And you look at the Eskimos, you look at the Inuits, you look at Lewis and Clark. They did not eat the organs. They ate the meat. They ate the fattiest of the meat. Lewis and Clark, obviously the very famous expedition across America. You read their journals. They're super interesting. I was just talking to someone about this today. They talk about how, when they would hunt, they would eat the fattiest parts of the animals. And they found that the people that didn't eat the fattiest parts died. If they weren't getting enough fat, they died. They fed the lean bits and the organs to their dogs. They ate the fat. The dogs ate the lean stuff and the organs. They can survive on different things than we can. We need the fat. We need the skeletal fat and even the abdominal fat. But, we get all the vitamins and things like that we need from the muscle and fat. So if you're eating organs, that's fine if you enjoy them. But I go by taste as well. If liver tastes good, go for it. Your brain's probably telling you something. Hey, you're a bit deprived. Get it. Eventually it will not taste as good, probably. Raw organs taste very different though. Like raw liver, for some reason, tastes so much better than cooked liver. It's just a different thing altogether. But this has a lot of vitamin A. And so if you're eating, half a pound of liver a day, that's completely out of proportion with the amount of meat that you're eating. You're eating 2 pounds of meat and you're eating half a pound of liver. That's 4 to 1 as opposed to 200 to 1, or 400 to 1. So you're eating this stuff out of proportion. And if you're doing this regularly, ongoing, you are going to build up these fat soluble vitamins that are going to reach a level of toxicity called hypervitaminosis. Hypervitaminosis A is well known and well described to suppress your TSH, your thyroid stimulating hormone, which will then reduce the amount of thyroid hormone produced by your thyroid. This will give you low thyroid. And so, Dr. Saladino and Carnivore Aurelius, all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm just eating meat and liver. And obviously liver is just the best thing ever. So that can't be it. And my thyroid's tanking and I feel like shit. Okay. Here's this little study that sort of says that if you have that you need sort of carbohydrates to do this, and forgetting the fact that our bodies make carbohydrates. We have blood sugar, we have glycogen. That didn't go anywhere. And you do get little spikes as well. So you kick yourself out of ketosis, when you eat, high protein or a big meal with a lot of protein in it, it will kick you out of ketosis for a little bit and then pop you back in because you make a corresponding amount of glucagon to actually, take you out to get your blood sugar back down to normal. But you do have this transient spikes. Okay. You drink some milk, does the same thing. So they're looking at this and saying, this must be, I need to eat exogenous carbohydrates. But as we know, we have hard evidence that we don't need any carbohydrates our entire lives, or else we wouldn't be here and the Inuits wouldn't be here. And also this is something that's well described, again, by the National Institute of Medicine and the National Association of Science. It's very clear. They're like, yeah, no, you don't need any carbohydrates. And, that's appealing to authority. Like, obviously, just because they're in charge doesn't mean that they're right, but, they do support their statement in this one. So when you're eating carbohydrates, it actually increases the amount of vitamins that you need. This is why people, look at carnivore diet and they say, well, this doesn't have enough vitamins and minerals. You can't survive. This doesn't have enough. Well, actually, when you're only eating meat and you're not eating carbohydrates, you're not eating, fruits and vegetables, you actually need less of these vitamins, a lot less, instead of 10, instead of needing milligrams of vitamin C, you need nanograms of vitamin C. Okay. Big difference, orders of magnitude, several orders of magnitude difference. Okay. So what happens? You have hypervitaminosis. Again, this is complete conjecture, but it's possible that someone who has hypervitaminosis can then eat carbohydrates, and all of a sudden their requirement for those vitamins actually increases as well. And they have too many vitamins, and now their need is here, so they have a toxic level. But now they eat carbohydrates, and now that brings about their demand up as well. So now it evens them out a bit. That could be what's happening. I don't know, but I do know that meat did not cause that, and not eating carbohydrates did not cause that. That's a fact, and you only need to look at the Inuits and the fact that ice ages happened to know that. Also, I've been doing strict carnivore for quite a lot longer than they have. People like Dr. Baker have as well, or maybe similar amount of time. And but then there's all sorts of people, like Kelly Hogan. She's been 10, 11 years just meat and just water. Charles Washington, even longer than that. There's people that have been doing this for decades in the West. And then of course all the human populations living naturally that just don't eat anything except meat. That's it. So we know that's not it. And if they're doing something similar to what I'm doing, but they're getting different results, it means they are doing something different that is significant. And I think that the main difference between them and I and Kelly Hogan and the Inuits is that they're eating organs. They're eating a lot of organs and even taking supplements for organs. I'm not there, and Kelly Hogan's not, and the Inuits aren't. I don't take that stuff. I don't think you need it. And so that's what I think is probably the difference, and might be what's going on there.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that thoughtful answer. It is, you just really have to look at the context of the diet and realize that a lot of, the RDAs or things were recommended is based on a diet that if you're eating carnivore, you're not eating, you don't need the same nutrients. And I always felt guilty for not getting enough organs in my diet. I never liked the taste. You're right about like frozen and raw. I think frozen and raw liver tastes way better than cooked liver, and smells a million times better. And getting some of it I think is important, but I never noticed a difference if I got a lot of it versus getting some. And I think just going out and pushing this idea that you need a lot of them, it really makes you kind of stop and think whether that's the right message or not. So I really do appreciate that. I definitely want to direct our listeners to your podcast, which I absolutely love. I told you before we started recording, when I found your podcast, I resorted all the episodes and started from the oldest to the newest. I've been listening to them in order, which is really great. All kinds of different topics you really address. You had one of my absolute favorite rants about baby formula, which was fantastic. I recommend it to anybody. Record number of F-bombs in the first 30 seconds, which is fantastic. I love it. And you also talk, about talking to other vegans, people that don't necessarily see eye to eye with you or with me. And, I want to preface this question by saying, I don't care. And I'm pretty sure you don't care. Whatever anybody chooses to eat, however they decide to live their life, whatever fundamentals, whatever they feel about animals is totally, totally fine. I support that. I'm not going to be the one standing at the corner of the street yelling at everybody that they need to not eat a carrot. You know what I mean? But I do think there's a lot of harm in telling people that if they don't eat in that particular way, then they are going to be harmed. And so I guess the question is, for you, why is it important to have the discussion with people that don't necessarily see eye to eye with you, to at least bring some of these things out to light to talk about?
Yeah. Well, I think that everyone makes their decisions, for a reason. There are a lot of vegans that I've met that are very conscientious. They've really thought about this, either for their health or for the environment, or, just being nice to animals. And I get that. These are all very important things. I completely agree with that. And so my outlook would be the same as theirs. I want to do what's right for my body. I want to do something that's beneficial to the planet and not harming it. I don't want to, have a bunch of animals suffer and die needlessly. I don't. The sad truth is that, we are heterotrophs. Something has to die for us to live. That's just a fact. Plants are living things too. They actually have a nervous system. They feel and respond to pain. They scream. I don't know if people know that. They scream when you start cutting into them or insects start eating them. They send out chemical signals and they aerosolize them. They go out to the other plants around them, their families, and tells them like, hey, we're being eaten by this bug. We're being attacked. Defend yourselves. And so they'll start making more poisons to that bug. Another bug starts eating them. They'll make another signal and they'll start producing a different toxin to that bug. Okay. So these aren't just dumb inanimate objects. They actually are complex living organisms. So, let's say, well, they're not as good as a cow. Fine. I can buy that. But what people don't realize is that, there's a study in Australia that actually showed that you have to kill 25 times the number of sentient animals to grow 1 pound of plant-based protein, which is not as bioavailable as animal protein, by the way. So it's actually more of a disparity if you actually want usable protein to every 1 pound of animal protein. So you're killing 25 times the amount of animals. You're killing all the snakes, all the gophers, all the rabbits, all the different birds and squirrels that are in that field. And you're tilling it up. You're grinding up animals when you're going through the field and plowing that up. You're getting all this runoff from the pesticides. It goes into the water, poisons the water, kills all sorts of animals. And then you have to kill all the animals that are coming around eating your crop. They have, people out there shooting deer and pigs and kangaroo and, anything else that comes in and screws with their crop. They have to kill these things. Those animals don't get eaten necessarily. I mean, sure, some do, but so these animals are dying needlessly. Whereas, you raise a cow, you have a relationship with that. You have a social contract. You take care of it, then it takes care of you. You keep it safe from harm. You raise its children. You feed it. You protect it from predation. You heal it when it's sick. You fix it when it's broken. And then you take care of them, give them a good life. And there's no nice way to kill something. But our means in the West with the pneumatic hammer and electrocution are as close to instant as it is possible to get. And so a lot of these very disturbing videos that come out about the slaughterhouses, they're in third world countries. And often they're actually hammed up on purpose to really scare the animals and rile them up and be extra cruel to them and extra nasty to them in order to just show something evil. And these are actually being encouraged by the PETA people saying, yeah, really mess with them, try to hurt them so that we can show how evil this is. No, you're being evil. You are torturing that animal. Oh, well, it'll save other animals. Bullshit. You are torturing that thing. And that is not what's happening. And certainly not in Western abattoirs and slaughterhouses. So I think it's important for people to understand this stuff. And I agree with them. I think that we should take care of animals. We have a responsibility that we're going to eat these things. We need to give them a good life. We need to give them a clean death. That is our responsibility. And you should and we have laws that protect this. You're cruel to an animal that you're raising, you go to jail, and you should. But also, you have a protected interest if you're raising that animal for market, because it's a commodity. If you hurt that animal, if it dies of sickness or injury, you don't get paid, and so you could end up losing your farm, losing your business, or just not making money. So you have a vested interest to actually protect that animal, to make sure that it's healthy and happy and grows up strong and healthy. So these animals get protected, whether or not this person, likes animals. Most of them do. Most of them actually really care about animals and work really hard to make sure that they're okay. So I don't have a problem with anyone eating the way that they want, and I certainly don't have a problem, with people who are honest about what they do. People go vegan for a number of different reasons, and by and large, they, there's some of the vegan activists that are pretty toxic, but most of just the normal people, they go vegan for really honest reasons. And, they want to improve their health, and they've just been sold like, oh, wow, they watch Game Change and go, wow, God, that all just makes sense, because, they don't know any better. And I've seen doctors taken in by this. And then I sort of point out the glaring holes in this and go, oh yeah, no. Okay. Yeah, no, obviously that's garbage. But, it was a very well done piece of propaganda. And I mean propaganda literally. That was a piece of propaganda. There was no veracity to anything those people were saying. It was just a convincing lie. That's all it was. And it was a commercial. James Cameron was the executive producer of that. Funny enough, he owns $140 million worth of a pea protein company. Well, look at that. Yeah, it's funny. You need all this protein. You got to get protein, but you can't get it from meat because, that's so bad. But look at this. I've got this right here for you. Look at that. Isn't that convenient? I mean, it's a con. It's an absolute con. And, and that's the name of marketing, is that you con people into buying your product. So I like having conversations with vegans and vegetarians, just because I want to make sure that I'm not wrong, and so I test my knowledge and experience with them, and maybe they'll bring something new to the table. This is something I did early on because I didn't want to be one of those guys that only looked at their side of the argument. John Stuart Mill said that if you only, to paraphrase, if you only know your side of the argument, then you don't know much. If you haven't heard the opposing argument in its most persuasive form from the horse's mouth, then you don't even know what the argument is. You don't know what the discussion is. So you need to go, and you don't hear it from your side. That's what I tell people. Don't just listen to me. I'm not trying to straw man anyone. I'm not trying to, I did a bit quick series on, things that vegans say. And I had this vegan cardiologist I had a debate with. It was a 3-on-3 debate. And it was just, and so I didn't want to just paraphrase, this is what he said. I played the tape. This is what he says. And I just went through point by point. This is why I disagree with that. This is why I think it's wrong. And I put resources and provided resources. So I think people should listen to that. And I tried to do that. I tried to go to different, vegan, doctors and nutritionists, and go to their websites, go to their YouTube channels, and just say, okay, what am I missing? You tell me, what am I missing? And, I found that all of these things were based on fallacies. Some of them were outright lies and fictions, or they would quote something, this happened. You look it up and like, no, that actually didn't happen. Or most things are based on the lie that cholesterol causes heart disease, which it does not. That's been definitively proven to be fraud. The Journal of American Medical Association published in 2015 actual internal memos from the sugar companies back in the 40s and 50s, detailing how they paid off 3 Harvard professors to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol was causing heart disease, and to exonerate sugar and say that it was safe and just an empty calorie. That's where that phrase comes from. And other professors from around the country as well, such as what was it? Keys. What's his stupid name?
Dr. Ansel Keys.
Yeah, that fraud. He was bought and paid for as well. He came up with the RDAs, so he was very, very famous for that. And he did this thing called the 7 Nations study, and people were like, "Wow, this is really conclusive." He studied these 7 nations, and the more cholesterol they ate, you had a parabolic increase in heart disease. Well, the problem with that is that he actually had full data for 23 different countries, and that they had no correlation with heart disease. So in fact, there's no correlation at all between heart disease and increased cholesterol and heart disease. When you show correlation, that does not prove causation, just like there's a correlation between ice cream sales going up and shark attacks. There is a correlation to that, but it doesn't mean that, sharks like eating, sweet, fattened children who have just eaten ice cream. When the summer months come in, it gets hotter. People buy more ice cream. They also go in the water where the sharks are. So that's where the correlation is. However, so correlation is not causation. However, if you show that there is no correlation, that proves there is no causation. You cannot have causation without first having correlation. So we know that there's no causation because there is no correlation. And so Ansel Keys was a big player in that. But, these Harvard professors that I mentioned before, one of them was named head of the USDA. And it was he who authored and published the 1977 declaration that cholesterol causes heart disease. And so we should stop eating it, stop eating saturated fat, stop eating meat, stop eating eggs, stop eating red meat especially, start eating more fruits and vegetables, more grains and everything, because they didn't have cholesterol in them. And so this is what most of the vegans hang their hat on, is this cholesterol theory of heart disease. And they base everything on that. Well, we know that that's false. We know that. And so whenever you have anything based on a false premise, you have to throw it out and then start from scratch. And that's something that they haven't done.
Yeah, that's right. I would direct anybody to Nina Teichel's book, The Big Fat Surprise. She goes in detail about Dr. Ancel Keys and how he came up with his theories in this horribly done study with that graph that you mentioned, but it contrasts that with all the data points that he had that were all over the place. It looked like a shotgun where, there's data everywhere, yet you're cherry picking the ones that best suit your case and do this very poor data to prove your point, which doesn't prove anything. It's ridiculous. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I'm really appreciative of you, that you are able to have those conversations with people in a way that's really respectful. And you're not shouting, again, from the street corner that this is the only way, and you're not calling people names. You're just talking about facts and trying to bring that to light. And I think the more of that we have, the more we can push this message through. I definitely want to be respectful of your time. You're ahead of us by 14 hours, which would be way past my bedtime if I was up at the time we're at. We would love to have you back anytime to continue this discussion. This has been super engaging. Really love, how much study you've done, how thoughtful you've been about this, how you're combining both anecdote with yourself and with your patients, but also the scientific facts and the studies that have been done. It's all very, very thoughtful. And again, we really appreciate that. Dr. Chakey, can you tell us where people can go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Well, thank you very much. Yeah. So I have a YouTube channel that's just Anthony Chaffee, MD, Chaffee spelled with 2 F's, 2 E's. And that's where I post a lot of videos and a lot of my content. I also have a podcast, which you mentioned, the Plant Free MD, and that's on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, whatever platform that you use, and that generally has the audio version of the videos that I would put on YouTube. But sometimes there's just stuff that's exclusive to that as well, like different interviews that only have audio. And then, I'm fairly active on Instagram as well. I have a lot of posts there that I try to comment on different aspects of diet and nutrition and evolution, and just sort of, try to put the facts out there. And also, we'll publicize there and on Facebook when I'm publishing a new video. I try to do at least 2 videos a week on YouTube, and my podcast, sometimes 3. And so I sort of do those as a premiere and let people know when that's happening. And then I have, and then my Instagram is just Anthony Chaffee, MD as well. I have Twitter, which is just Anthony.Chaffee, and sort of similar sort of things there. I'm trying to sort of broaden out onto different platforms, like, unfortunately, TikTok, which is just like the bane of, I think, society right now. But I sort of put on a few videos there. So I just would put on different clips and show clips and maybe some short videos that I do there. And that's most of it. I have developed a website called thecarnivorelife.com, and that is, it's under development. I haven't actually dedicated a lot of time to it yet because I haven't had really time to, but I plan to start putting up my blog posts that I've put up on Instagram. They're now sort of lost in the shuffle. Maybe they're more difficult for people to find. But I think that people have found very useful. At least they've told me they found them very useful. And I'll start putting those up online, and then putting testimonials from different patients and friends and family that have done this, and their personal experiences with that as well, to see about helping people. We do a weekly Q&A session. I started a Patreon for that, and so people that can, it's like $3 a month or something like that, and that entitles you to join these weekly Q&A sessions with myself and my friend Rena over in Sydney. She goes by the 5-Minute Body on Instagram, and so we try to do that. And that's pretty much. I think that's most of it.
Okay, probably great. Yeah, we'll link to all of that in the show notes. I don't know why I mentioned bedtime. You clearly never sleep.
No. That's amazing. I was on call this weekend, and so I've basically been working the last 62 hours. I had a couple hours of sleep last night. I had maybe 2 hours of sleep Saturday night.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I can definitely tell you, based on myself and people that I coach, once they start eating this way, they have way more energy, and it's a lot easier to get by with less sleep. So that's fantastic. We're really appreciative of your work. Just totally exhaustive stuff that you're able to put out. Dr. Anthony Chakey, thank you so very much for everything you do, and thank you for appearing on our podcast today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.